Alrighty then, you beautiful people. I just changed the title of the of the stream to Sori Sick Ask Me Anything. So we were going to do all those bands that I mentioned in the original thingamajiggy, but Sori's really pretty much down for the count relative to how she's feeling, especially in regard to the pregnancy. We're in the home stretch, but I did. So there's a couple of you guys that did want to hang out. So I guess we could do an Ask Me Anything session. Or if I don't receive any questions in the next 2 to 5 minutes, I guess I could just close up shop and call it a day. But yeah, we did have those songs lined up and downloaded. But Sori's, the final stages of the pregnancy are kicking her bum, as it were. So she's got to sit this one out. But like I said, guys, you can ask me anything, and I'll be good to answer it. I think we should be good to go. But like I said, you guys might have stuff going on in your world where you're like, man, I don't want to ask you anything. I want to go home, which is completely fine, obviously. So, but what I'm gonna do is I'm going to keep the ticker up. You guys can ask me anything. No, it's not the Kung Fu Flu. She's preggo, and so, we're coming into the home stretch. We've got 6 weeks left until homeboy shows up. So, the body's preparing all that horrible jazz. We are 38 weeks. Due date is Tuesday. Whoa, let's go bacon. Congrats to you, my guy. I am sure that's really good. What's up, Pat? Any more Japanese metal band reactions? Yeah, well, let me put a stop on that. I know we've got some K-pop bands on the docket. I don't know about any J-pop bands yet, so I'm gonna have to pull back on that. Holy smokes, it looks like Sarah Palin was running and then she lost. Not to turn this into a Middle America stream, but that's interesting. Oh, you're having a girl. Damn, I'm jealous, bro. I wish we were having a girl. We're having a boy. But it's all good. As long as homie's healthy. We just did another thingamajiggy today, and baby looks good, so that's good. The baby looks good today, so that's good. So what's new with everybody? What's everybody on? We should have probably done a breakdown of the Korn show that we just went to. That was pretty fun. Ran into a couple villagers at this Korn show, so that was good. I didn't really get a lot of chance to talk to anybody because we were spending most of the time backstage, but did wave to a few people and stuff like that. Let's see what these questions are. How's Sori? She's good, man. Like I said, it's the home stretch, so she's, it's tough. It's tough right now. What type of work do you do? This is actually what we do. This is what we do full time. Hey, Michelle. So, have you ever listened to Tetrarch? I don't think I have. Did you watch the AJW video about the Zuckerberg clip? Let me see. Was that the last one you sent me? AJW. What is AJW again? Okay. Actual Justice Warrior. Yeah, I've seen the clip with Zuckerberg and Rogan, and part of me is like, yo, how is this news, right? Like, part of me is like, why is everybody making a big deal out of that? I felt like that was pretty obvious, but I think the fact that he said it and admitted it, I think, is kind of like setting people off, which I completely and totally understand. Um, but it's just weird. Like, I thought it was obvious that that's what was going on. But hey, Applejack, what's good, bro? Hey, Michelle, you got another gift. That's great. That's great. That's great. Can y'all rack to Machine Head Slaughter the Martyr? Yes. I'm actually a fan of Machine Head, to be honest with you. I like them. I like what they do. How was the Korn concert? They still have original band members. Fieldy, who's the original bassist, is out. Kind of like a rest up type of thing. David, the original drummer, he's gone. Like, he's still alive, but he's out of the band, and I don't get the impression that he's going to be returning, David. I mean, the show was great. We showed up late, but so did Korn, because there was some weather issues. So we actually hit the venue pretty much at the same time as Head, and then coordinating that stuff. There's like 10,000 people. There's lines and all this jazz. So coordinating like meetups and things like that is hard to do. And so, like, a lot of it is like playing phone tag. He's hitting me, I'm missing him, vice versa. But we cut through some lines, and we got scooped up by one of the event coordinators. It's like, yo, you can't do that. And I was like, well, like, I tried to explain the situation without sounding like cliche, like I'm with the band, blah blah blah. It's like, sure, you're with the band, whatever. But she let us walk to the booth, and we got our passes. And so, like I said, we were coming in the same time that B was coming in, and we linked up with them. And right as we were like, saying what's up to, because we don't see each other like often, but right as like everybody was saying what's up, doing the hug thing or whatever, Evanescence was on. So he's like, yo, you got to go and watch them. And like, I guess Birds and stuff was supposed to come out. So like, we were like on side stage, like we were backstage right where Amy Lee was, and that was pretty cool, like watching her live. And she had her wardrobe person like had some wings, like little angel wings or whatever, and like she never wore them. Like, it was kind of cool, like seeing like, oh, this is what happens in the background, like, you know what I'm saying, like. But she was so like into it. Yo, Amy Lee's crazy live, bro. Like, honestly, she's unbelievable. So that was cool. That was a really cool experience, like watching like how that works out. And so we were all in the catering area, and Amy just walks right by us. I was like, yo, you're a badass live, honestly, bro. And she turned around, she's like, oh, and like she came over, and I introduced her to Sori and all that. So that was pretty cool. That was a pretty cool experience watching that, like, backstage and all that stuff. But I was so happy to be at a live show, so that was pretty cool. Have you ever watched Reservation Dogs? No, but it is a show we like to binge. So right now we're watching The Good Lord Bird, which is pretty funny. It's a pretty funny series for sure. But no, yeah, I want to watch Reservation Dogs. Yeah, I will definitely let everybody know like how you guys feel about Sori being out. She hates it. She hates disappointing people. So do I. But it's one of those things where, her body is just, having a hard time with it at the end, which is completely fine. Health wise, she's okay. Health wise, she's completely good. The baby is October 15th. Is his due date. I doubt very highly this one is gonna go on schedule. You know what I'm saying? I think this one's gonna come. This one's gonna show up really, really early. Have you ever listened to Mr. Soul by Buffalo Springfield? No. I've never heard that one. I'm definitely gonna check it out for sure. Perkinos in the house. Perkinos in the house. So this person is the first Alaska native. So she'd be an actual native of Alaska to win. So kudos to her. Tell me, how was the chat with Amy? The chat with Amy was really good. It wasn't. I mean, it wasn't a really long one. It was just that Brian had told us that she was going to be like releasing birds or something like that on the last song of her set. And so he was like, yo, you guys can, we were like right backstage on her side of the stage because she kind of favored like one side of the stage because her keyboard and all that stuff was set up on the backstage area where we were. And there was this band named Palais Royale. And so their tech guy, it was me, Sori, and him. We were all chilling back there watching the set happen. And like I was saying to everybody, she had some wings or something that her wardrobe person had for her. But she I don't know, like in her live shows, like she's really energetic. She doesn't rock like, she's not like a windmill rocker type person, but she's running all over the stage and stuff. So she was like sweating, like her hair was like matted with sweat like halfway through the set. And they were basically the first act to go on because the weather screwed up everybody's set pretty much. So there were two bands that were supposed to go on before them, but they weren't able to go on. And so Evanescence was on first, and she basically got everybody warmed up and ready for Korn. So anyway, so we were back there watching. It was pretty cool to see that. And then when we were all in the catering area, and she just like walked right by us, like right off the stage. She's like very, like if she's going someplace, she's kind of got tunnel vision. So I was like, I said, you killed it out there. You're pretty good live. Well, she was across the kitchen. She came back around to talk to me, put her hand out, shook my hand. I was like, man, that shit was crazy, B. And then I introduced Sori to her, and then, that was pretty much the sum total of our conversation. It wasn't a big, long one. So yeah, it was pretty cool. Then after the show, I'm sure everybody knows by now, Amy jumps on with Korn to do "Freak on a Leash," which is the last song of the night. And so then I was, we went back out into the catering area, and B was like, "Yo, where y'all at?" And I was like, "Yo, I'm back there." I was like, "Yo, just chill," because last time like we went over, like he didn't even get a chance to like change, like. He had to take a shower like 2 hours after. So, like, I made a point to make sure that we stayed in the catering area and just didn't go to his room because he just, you know what I'm saying? Like, we haven't seen each other in a while, so, like I didn't want him to feel like that. So I was like, "Yo, man, I'll just be in the waiting area. I'll be in the catering area. I'll be in the kitchen." I was getting stuff for Sori or whatever. And all of a sudden, I hear this singing in the back. Now, this is after everything is done. This is after everybody's show is over. Everybody's going home. We're only there because we're, hanging out with whoever, whatever. And all of a sudden I hear this piano playing and I hear this scale work, do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. And I was like, yo, somebody's singing. And there was another like friend of one of the band, And she's like, yeah, that's Amy. And I'm like, she's like, yeah, she's doing scale work. I'm like, yo, this is crazy. She did a full set. Then she went out with Korn. And it's the end of the night. It's like 12:30. And there's Amy Lee doing scale, practicing whatever after everybody's gone. Like, it's the shit like that I'm like, damn, yo. Like, she's insane. Like, that's why she's so good. Because honestly, vocally, she's so good live. Like, and like I said, I was like right there. Like, the speakers were there, her mics, her guitar techs. Like, I was 10 feet away from her. I took a couple pictures where I was literally like 10 feet away from her when she was performing, and it's like it's a crazy thing to behold, like, live like that. But like, I don't know, like, it wasn't like she was showing off, you know, because it wasn't like she was, you know, because it was after the show, and everybody was like doing their VIPs and all this, and like B had to go out and hang out with people outside a little bit before, you know, he could come hang out with us, because, you know, you buy those like VIP tickets and stuff, you meet the band backstage and stuff, so he had to do all that. So it was like at a point where like nobody was paying attention, and she was just doing that shit, you know. It's like, you know, like LeBron taking 100 free throws after a basketball game. Like, the really, really good people, like people who are like all-time great at something, like, no matter what, if it's like warfighting intelligence, if it's basketball, if it's music, it's always the same. They always do that extra thing when nobody's looking that you wouldn't expect them to have to do, but they're still doing it. That's what makes them great. Like that, that habitual thing that they did. Jonathan said they're not doing VIPs, so they did. There was a group of people like outside. Like, they didn't get to come into the catering area, like you had to be whatever, but there was a group of people outside that they had to meet, and they were doing the picture thing and all that stuff, so I just assume it was one of those meet the band VIP thingamajiggies. It was like 30 people, and we were hanging out with security, and you know, because B was out there, and then his security would be attached to him. They would go in and go out, and people would come up and wave. So I don't know. Van, you and Sori family, I love you both. I trust you both with private moments in my life. Yeah, I appreciate that, Michelle. I really, really, really do. That's called riyaz in Hindi when you practice singing. Yeah. Yeah, I got a lot of I had a lot of respect for her. I got a lot of respect for her. I mean, like, because me personally, like, I didn't really view her as like a metal singer. Like, I viewed her as like a hard pop. Like, it's like, I don't really view that kind of music as like metal. Like, it's funny, like when me and Amy Lee hear her like writing, she's like, it's actually like, me and Sori were talking about this. It's actually like a challenge for me to like write like that, because like all I know is, you know, metal and aggressive shit. So I never really considered her like a metal singer, but you don't have to do windmill headbanging for 20 minutes to like bring energy to a crowd. And that crowd, like, it was like weird energy at the beginning, because like they had been delayed for so long. They, you know, people had been promised and it didn't happen and things like that. So the crowd was kind of like in and out. You know what I'm saying? And like for her, she like, the first quarter of the set, like, people were completely engaged. And a lot of it had to do, in my opinion, with her. She was like extremely energetic. She was running up and down that stage, maintaining notes, which I think is just ridiculous. Like, I had a lot of respect for her after that, because I'm like, yo, there are other ways to be an energetic, because that's what drew me to metal music, man, is like the energy, like the energy that Korn put out in Woodstock or whatever. Like, that was one of the crazy things for me, where I was like, yo, she is metal. She's just metal in a different way. You know what I'm saying? So, yeah. Yeah, Clarissa, absolutely. I'll definitely pray for your family member who's sick for sure. And then when Korn came on, um, they had the greatest production I've ever seen in my life. Like, no exaggeration. They had this, like, LCD, like, cage that would come up and down. And so, like, they were able to do, like, a lot of really cool things. Like, that at one point, like, the entire stage was engulfed in flames, but it was all digital, which is really fascinating considering some of the stuff that we've all been talking about with consciousness and things like that. But, like, they did something mega creative. And I was asking B, I'm like, yo, where did you guys get that idea? Who came up with that? I thought some third-party consulting firm, because there were a couple pieces of that set that they did. It's like literally like impossible to describe. Like, you just literally have to see it. But there was one particular song. It was called "Alone I Break," and the visual was basically like this, like, space alien guy, like half human, half fly in a spacesuit type dude, and like he was like fighting to ascend. It's like the entire time, like while the song was playing, like you're engulfed in this 3D experience, and like it's on almost holographic on stage with the band. It was insane. It was like next level. So after the show, I was like, yo, we're sitting down, we're talking. I'm like, yo, who came up with who came up with that? What firm? It was him. It was him. It was Brian. It was Head and Monkey and Ray, the drummer. They came up with all those ideas, and then this other, tech firm basically did it for them and made it work. But it was unbelievable to me. It was unbelievable. I'd never seen anything like that before in my life. Never in my life. It was such an insane show. It was just a crazy show. Are your glasses decorative? I suspect they're just decorative. Vin, what's your favorite Korn song, and why isn't it Make Me Bad? Why isn't it Make Me Bad their best? My favorite Korn song is Got the Life. I caught a 30-second clip of Got the Life from Woodstock, and it changed my life forever. Like, unbelievable. But yeah, so that's ultimately my favorite song. I also love the message of that song. Make Me Bad is also a very good song, although, yeah, let me keep my thoughts to myself. Yeah, Make Me Bad's a really, really good song. What is your favorite death metal reaction that you've done? There was one dude, I hate to say it like this, but the dude killed himself. But it was I think the name of the band is actually Death. I may be completely wrong. But, yeah. It was the first song that we did of them, and it was just so heavy, it just completely blew me away. So, yeah, I think it's from the band Death. I don't know the name of the song, though. Yeah, Chuck. Yeah. It was the Chuck Guys band. Rest in peace to the home. But that was my favorite one. I didn't remember the song. Justin is mine. Yeah, Justin is a crazy song. Follow the Leader was actually the first, not only Korn record, but metal record in general that I ever bought, rock record that I've ever bought. So, is that an F? I think you're rocking an Evanescence shirt in this, Michelle. That's badass. Yeah, Paradise Lost. True Belief, I think is the name of the song. I was listening to that song for a while. That song was in my running playlist. It's something about True Belief or something. Yeah, she's just sick. Sori she also had like fainting spells like before the kids and everything. Like she'd get these fainting spells that they never really could figure out what was going on. So there's always some of that too. Hey, what's up, St. Petersburg, Florida? Nah, nothing wrong. Nothing wrong with the fetus, BC. Fetus is doing pretty good. Yo, that like so John came out with the bagpipes, and like the whole place like went crazy because that was the first song coming back from the encore. So he came out with the bagpipes, and it was crazy because the entire crowd went crazy because we were set up by the sound bar, you know, like so like you know the guys that do the sound and everything. So like we were set up right there with again there was this other band Royale that was supposed to play. They got canceled. So we were both like chilling in the sound bar. So we were like literally right in the middle of the entire place. So we had like a complete like direct eye view, and it was just such an amazing show to see live. Like I wish everybody could see it. Can you believe? Yeah, that's crazy. In November, um, yeah, you know, Reza was born in November as well. So what? November what, Michelle? Who knows? Maybe you know. I think maybe Reza and your baby probably just 1 year apart. My first concert was the Korn Sick and Twisted tour in the year 2000. I was showing Brian because he was asking me. He's like, "Yo, what did you think about the show?" And I was like, "Yo, man, that shit was crazy." But Korn live, they do sound so good live, yo. It's ridiculous. Rose was born November 17th. Let me check to see what day Reza was born. His due date was November 14th, and I was like, please, God, don't do that to me. Because that's the birthday of my ex. So I was like, no. What day was Reza born? Oh, man, I'm such a... Everybody was laughing at me down there because we have so many kids, so it was hilarious. Greater production than Rammstein. You know what's funny? I saw Rammstein in 2001. I was literally at the gate, like the front, like front stage at the gate. Like the fire, like you know, like when you see fire on stage or you see pyrotechnics on stage, it's like, oh my god, like hey, that's cool. But then, like when you're there and you feel the fire, you feel the heat. I remember just like looking at my girlfriend at the time, and I'm like, holy shit, that's real fire, bro. Like that shit was just crazy to me. But as far as like a feast for the eyes, like as far as like your eyes wanting to take in so much and having a hard time between like focusing on the band and then focusing on all the shit that's happening out there, like I'd never seen anything like that. So Sori's saying November 19th is when Reza was born. So they're like a year and 2 days apart. Shout out to Delaney O'Connell. How many Death songs have you reacted to so far? Have you played them on your own? No. I never thought to start playing songs until the album with Scars. So in the album with Scars, they have a guitarist, and during the COVID situation, he basically did a live show. But what he did was, all he did was play his parts. Right? So all he did was play his parts. And he was doing it as kind of like a live COVID concert thingamajiggy. And I gotta tell you, man, like when I saw that, that's when I started was like, yo, I need to learn these songs. Because it was like, because I play guitar, so it was like really inspiring to watch like somebody who was able to just, and it was cool too listening to it, because I was like, yo, this is how you songwrite. Like, there's a big difference between just writing riffs and songwriting. And so that was another thing where I was like, I was looking at what he was doing, and I was starting to see a lot of the logic between some of the decisions he was making. And so then I started like learning his stuff, because it's just very, very inspiring to me. So no, I haven't learned any Megadeth songs, because I didn't start wanting to learn music songs until really, really recently. Ben Webb is here. Holy shit, my guy. Probably because he heard that Sori was down for the count. Do you find it weird how Western media frames North Korea as totalitarian while South Korea as another land of the free, despite South Korea having laws barring contact with North Korean family? Yeah, it was actually, what actually really brought that to my attention was Revo. So Revo does a lot of K-pop, Korean stuff, and he was talking about like the generational gap and things of that nature, but also about how oppressive the government was. I was like, holy shit! Like, this entire time, all you hear about is how oppressive North Korea is. But aside from what you pointed out, Ben, there's other shit too, where it's like, yo, man, that's like a really crazy environment. Like, I don't think I'd do very well over there. You know what I'm saying? South Korea, I mean. I watched a documentary on North Korea, and it's far from totalitarian. I think one of like the crazy byproducts of all the crazy shit that's happened that we've all seen is like you end up feeling like, yo, I can't believe a word anybody says about anything. You know what I'm saying? Like, I am certain that people in North Korea, like, that I don't believe that the people that have said those things about North Korea, I don't believe everybody is crazy. But I just think after a while now, everybody's like looking at news and looking at situations being like, all right, what's the agenda? Why does my government want me to believe this? And it's almost like whether or not whatever you're being told in the media, whether or not it's true, almost becomes irrelevant to me. And the only thing that I'm thinking about now is like, what is the angle? What are they trying to get me to believe, and why? And I'm not sure if that's healthy or not healthy, but that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I think a lot of people are at that place with shit right now. It's like, yeah, man, sure, they're horrible, sure. You know what I'm saying? Shout out to Ryan. Good to see you, buddy. What's your guilty pleasure band? What's your guilty pleasure? I don't really have a guilty pleasure band. I gotta tell you, seeing My Immortal from Backstage was crazy, because you get to kind of, because like I said, we're like 10, 15 feet away from her. So like, you get to kind of see from the artist's perspective. So I'm like looking out and seeing like everybody had their iPhone up. I told Sori to take a picture of this. Pretty crazy. Like, seeing all of that like was crazy to me. I don't really have like a guilty pleasure. There's some like R&B stuff that I like. There's something War something. I forgot what the guy's name was, but he was like, he was an R&B dude, and that's a song that me and Sori listen to when we're in certain kind of moods. But yeah. Vin, are you a big Public Enemy fan? I would assume that you are. Not at all. I'm not a big not head PE. Sorry, big Public Enemy. I'm not a big Public Enemy fan at all. I can't even tell you. Fight the Power. I think Fight the Power. I'm sure I'm ideologically aligned with. I think I'm ideologically aligned with them. But I never really listened. They were kind of a little bit before my time. You know what I'm saying? They're a little bit before my time, so I never really got onto them. They kind of had a really old school feel to me, and by the time I was really like heavy into to hip hop, I was into the whole Mace, B.I.G. type rap. You know what I'm saying? I will be honest. I've been praying that I will be a good mother for both of my children. Well, you know, I think the desire is what's most important. You know, Michelle. I mean, there's so many things where I just look at Sori and I'm like, yeah, like it's like I tell the kids and everybody, like you just try to be a little bit better tomorrow than you were today, and if you do that, that's how you can count success. You know what I'm saying? As long as you could look at something, you're like, okay, I'm a little bit better. Got a little bit better at the bottle today, a little bit better, quicker on changing the diaper. Just little incremental things. Speaking of guilty pleasures, it's funny because I was thinking to myself, like a name popped into my head. It was Vanilla Ice. And I remember going to school, and the white kids had the radio, and it was Vanilla Ice, and we were all listening to Vanilla Ice on the way to school. And then all of a sudden I woke up one day and like Vanilla Ice wasn't cool anymore. Like I still thought like for that time period that Vanilla Ice and MC Hammer, I thought that was badass music, bro. Like I thought those guys were wrecking shop. Like it was a little bit, you know, obviously now it's a little bit dated and weird. Like it's obviously not like, you know, very complex music, whatever people want to say. But at the same time, like, I don't know, man. I felt like they were rocking shit when they got popular for a reason. Like, whether or not record labels or whatever want to put, you know, a certain image out there, at the end of the day, you got to have some kind of talent to make it the way that Vanilla Ice and MC Hammer made it during that time period. Like, just because the talent isn't necessarily songwriting or singing, it could be charisma. It could be, you know, being telegenic. I mean, there's a lot of other things, but at the time, Vanilla Ice was the shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, that's just how I felt about it. It was just badass music. The new Dragon Ball Super movie is pretty dope. Yeah, like I'm a little bit bummed. I'm a little bit bummed that my kids aren't in the DBZ. That's the thing. Like I'm with you with Doug Johnson. Like Bone Thugs and Harmony. You know, it's really interesting. Like if somebody were to say to me, like, "Yo, if I was to send a metalhead rap music, I feel like Bone Thugs would be the closest. Bone Thugs would be the kind of group that a metalhead could listen to and appreciate from the rap side of things, because they had that literal harmony where they were literally singing at times, and they were pretty good at being emotive, and their beat selection was always on the energetic side. So they were always like, Bone Thugs to me is the closest that I think a rap group could come to a metal band. Like I could see them, like, honestly, two of those guys strapping up with regular guitars and it being some shit. Onyx too. Although Onyx is more like just like a one-note death metal band. You know what I'm saying? Where like Bone Thugs was actually singing, like they were actually harmonizing. They were actually, you know, intertwining major and minor keys to actually do something emotive. You know what I'm saying? Like it was a little bit you were demanding a little bit more from the audience, I think, with Bone Thugs and with regular rap. What about Body Count? They have a good song with Amy Lee. Not great, but good. Yeah, I don't know, man. Seeing her over there, like I said, I just gained hella respect for her. The Body Count, there's a Body Count song, it's Raining Blood, actually, that I like that cover. That cover of Raining Blood is pretty crazy. Raining Blood! Probably going to put a Tyler song in a DJ stream sometime before too long. Tyler? There's like a band named Tyler? That should be interesting. I'll skip to the part where Vin proclaims that Biggie is better than Tupac. I mean, is that like really a debate? Is there anybody that thinks like Tupac is a better rapper than Biggie? Like rapper? Okay, so there's a rapper called Tyler the Creator. I see what you're saying. Yeah, I don't think that there's any like contest, like lyrically speaking, that Big was lyrically way better than Pac. You know what I'm saying? Yeah, I agree, Sean. Like Big was way better. It's not even close lyrically. As far as like who had the most cultural impact, I don't think that that's even. I also don't believe that that's close. I think that Pac had way more of a cultural impact than Big. Like Big doesn't have Brenda's Got a Baby, a Dear Mama, anything like that. Like Big doesn't have any of those like that are gonna stand the test of time and make you cry after you, even if you've heard it a million times. Like there's that song Sky's the Limit. There's Juicy. Those are positive songs. Those are great, but they're not that emotive gutter struggle stuff. Tupac had Changes. You had him for Ghetto. You had Dear Mama. You had Brenda's Got a Baby. I mean, you just there were so many songs that were just so relevant and so powerful that Big, like I said, Big's never had a moment like that. And you could say, well, he died at 24. Pac died at 26. Dear Mama was written, around, he was 21, 22. And Dear Mama's not really a very complex song lyrically, but it's just powerful, man. Like, and that's the difference. You could have a guy like Yngwie Malmsteen who's like, obviously blows, Brian would say like that, Yngwie is crazier as far as like what he does with his guitar. But as far as like between Head from Korn and Yngwie Malmsteen, who has influenced the culture more, like it's not even close. I'd say that people are gonna say whatever. People would say, oh, that's because it's your man, blah blah blah. Like, and we've had this conversation, and he doesn't agree with me, but he's wrong. Like, to me, like, what he did with the guitar, like, he inspired an entire generation of people and created an entire sound. And what people say, oh, there were other bands that were doing new metal before Korn. Like, yeah, I get it. Just like there were other bands that were doing metal before Sabbath, but. Yeah, so that's what it's like to me. Like, Big is like Yngwie Malmsteen, like perfected the craft, like can't be improved, can do anything, has no weaknesses. And Pac, I would say, would be more like Korn, just like having those moments like Blind and Got the Life and Clown and Freak on a Leash, like Here to Stay. Korn has had some cultural moments that shook the industry. Yngwie's never done that, but obviously he's a much better guitarist than anybody in Korn, obviously. But who's more impactful? That's the other thing. I would actually assume Yngwie was more influential than Head. Yeah, I mean, I guess. I just don't think he is. I don't think he is. You hear how Snoop talked about how Pac recorded song to song. Yeah, by that logic, you prefer Tupac. No, I don't. I should prefer Tupac, but I prefer Big. A lot of that had to do was because I'm from Brooklyn. I'm Jamaican. You know what I'm saying? Like, well, I did some time in Brooklyn. I wouldn't say I'm from Brooklyn. I'm from the Bronx, really, to be honest. I associate myself more with the Bronx. I did spend some time in Brooklyn, though. And I got a lot of family. You know, obviously, if you're Jamaican, you got family on Flatbush Avenue, obviously. But nah, I like Big more than Pac. I like Big way more than Pac. Hey, Zombie Holic in the house. Ask you anything about a prayer. Been in the hospital since 25th August. Surgery ends on September 6th. My aneurysm aorta is ticking time bomb. The inner burst. I'm dead. Holy shit, Zombie. So that surgery is designed to take care of that? Like, make sure that that's okay? Suicidal Thoughts by Biggie. Yeah, that was crazy. What's up, Emily? I will tell her to get well soon. Is that my Emily Lee, by the way? Hey, Vid, hope you're as good in that story feels. Hey, just some random dude. I appreciate it. Then Nirvana is the GOAT according to Vin. I would not have a problem with Nirvana being considered a GOAT band. If somebody said Nirvana is the GOAT band over the last 30 years, I wouldn't necessarily argue with you. I think that Teen Spirit is like an eternal song. Like there's never going to be a time when that song does not sound fresh and relevant. There's never, in my opinion, there's never going to be a time when Smells Like Teen Spirit, if you have a group of people that have never heard that song and you hit play, universally, no matter what kind of music they're in, they're going to like that song. Like, I feel like that song is probably a perfect song and cannot be improved upon. I feel like Nirvana had a couple of those moments, man. Like, they had a couple moments. Like, I agree. Like, if you think about it, there's not a lot of bands that have songs like that. There's just not a lot of bands that have songs like Smells Like Teen Spirit. Nirvana was a GOAT band for 7 months in 1992. Heart-Shaped Box, yeah, that was another one. There's Something in the Way, which I recently discovered on the Batman soundtrack. I mean, there were a lot of... That dude had a lot of moments, man. A lot of moments. They had a lot of moments. What is sad, we have no torchbearers today. The decline of the West. Yeah. I think it's because... of... I do think we have torchbearers now. I just think the distribution portals are so wide now. You got people getting $1 million record deals off of a YouTube account or a Spotify. I forgot their SoundCloud. You know, I know that's happening in hip hop. Like they're just churning out. I mean, back in the day, if you knew somebody that had a record, like having a record deal was like this mythical thing in the hood. Now, like everybody and their mother's getting a record deal, just doing the, you know what I'm saying, like the dudes I grew up with, like they had a record deal in Germany. They could go overseas and because they, you know, they were in a band. And to be honest with you, I love these people, but they're not that good. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like it's like the distribution, like record labels are now the bar of entry is so much lower because it seems to be that, especially in a context like YouTube. Think about this. YouTube, like one of the main things that they'll tell you is you need to be consistent when you're putting out information because you're trying to get into the algorithm and ride the wave and all the rest of it and get the ad revenue. So it, and everybody will tell you, they'll be like, yo, I would rather do 3 videos in a week. Most of the time they'll tell you to do 1 video a week. That's one of the reasons I don't have one of those, like, how to be a successful YouTuber packages, because, I'm not going to tell you guys that stuff. Like, it's a grind, But, like, they'll tell you, like, it's better to put out 4 mediocre videos than 1 really, really, really good video. And they're right, because, it's really about driving, it's you give YouTube something to work with. So if I'm looking at that from the perspective of being a record label, then the way to generate revenue changes, because before I'm looking at YouTube as like one of my main competitors. People can just download the song, yada yada yada. But now that I can claim the song and suck up all the ad revenue, it becomes a legitimate. And if you have a bunch of major artists, I mean, think about Slipknot's record label. That thing had like 1.6 million views when the song came out, like in a day. So they're getting significant cap. My point is, if you are a record label owner, you're gonna say, I want to sign 10 people. If their talent level's like at a 5, I'm gonna sign 10 people, make them do music, pay them nothing. And, structure the contract pretty much relative to their social media imprint. And then I'm just going to put as much of that out of there because that's how to gain the algorithm. And hopefully, I'm not thinking about putting out art if I'm a record label. What I'm thinking about is I want to sign 10 artists and get 100 songs out there so that one of them pops. Right? Like, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for one of them to pop, one of them to get a couple million views, whatever. So all of that to say, that's what I think is happening right now with music, is that, the Nirvanas, the Korns of the world are 1 in 10,000. I'm talking about like bands. But now that 40,000 bands are being signed, finding that one is a lot more difficult. They're out there, but I think it's a lot more difficult because the distribution channels are so difficult. Yeah, I think Tom McDonald's is an independent artist. I mean, when you get your stuff in the mail, if you're a YouTuber and you're making what they think is significant money, you have to file that as a business, as a small business owner, and you have to. There's a whole bunch of paperwork once you hit a certain kind of threshold. So. And you're actually a contract. I'm actually officially a contractor with YouTube, and so like we have this, you know what I'm saying? So it opens the door for a lot of like independent artists to work. You know what I'm saying? And that's one of the things I've always said, like, obviously lyrical content. I think Tom McDonald is limited as far as like what he can do lyrically, but that's only one aspect of the game. Like, there's a lot of aspects of the game that you have to consider. You know what I'm saying? Like, obviously, from a person who's like, the Bronx is a birthplace of rap, so I'm gonna have a certain perspective on what I think good rap is or whatnot. But as far as like the ability to read the social tea leaves, to understand where you would fit in, and to understand your constituency and what they need and what they're looking for, I think that Tom McDonald presents a really brilliant business model. And you just have to realize that you have to, generate as much of the capital as you possibly can, because you're really just swimming around one drain. You know what I'm saying, relative to that? But you can generate a lot of revenue that way. There's a lot of ways to do this shit. There's a lot of ways to... The internet, it's fascinating to me when I sit back and think about it. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you have a plan... I would probably never do a package on like how to be a successful YouTuber, but I probably would do something on how to pick up money online, because it is there are lots of ways and lots of avenues to do it, and I think we need time for Meta to really build up to Zuck's vision. But I think that's going to be another massive game changer and alleyway for so many different ways of generating revenue and income. It's very interesting. Generally, the message makes libs uncomfortable, which is a win. Funny thing is that libs and conservatives are basically the same people politically. When you cut a liberal or fascist plead, the difference between a Democrat and a Republican is tiny. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that. The last new band I like actually formed this year. You guys don't even know where to look, but you're pretending to be critics. I love Ben. I don't know what I am, Ben. What I am is what I am. But what's the band that you like? I know you liked Andrew Jackson Jihad. I know that you really like that band. Which is why we need truly diverse convos like this here. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think that having these conversations are absolutely important, because that's a major issue with our country. There are elements in our country who are, I don't know if pushing for a civil war is a fair way to frame it, but I think that there are definitely elements in our country who, let me say this way, will fulfill their prophecy of civil war, because there are other elements in our country that are banking on the assumption that we're not going to talk to each other and that we're not going to listen to each other. Okay, what band do you like currently? I just think Republicans lose ground because they're always, aside from Trump, it seems to me Republicans don't know how to connect emotionally to their constituency or the people that they want to vote for them. Like, the things that they say, the things that they do, kind of make you scratch your head. You get a guy like Ted Cruz, who says, he's talking, mocking the quote Starbucks barista, blah blah blah. We're talking about the student loan thing, and it's like, look, I understand, like, if you're on the right, you're supposed to be like a fiscally conservative and socially liberal. That's kind of the idea. But you make a comment like that, not realizing that a lot of your constituents are going to benefit from the student loan forgiveness program. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's stuff like that where it's like, yeah, and then, like, if you're in Texas, you're like, yeah, he definitely owned those libs with that Starbucks comment, but at the same time, it's like, yeah, but I was gonna get crushed by this student loan debt. Now it's $10,000 forgiven. It's actually helping me. Like, it's stuff like that where I'm like, Republicans don't get it. You know what I'm saying? Like, they don't. Whereas Trump, when he speaks, he is able to get people to feel like they're understood and that they're heard. Whether or not we agree with it and whether or not he's being genuine isn't the issue. I think Republicans have always had a problem with connecting with people. Like Sarah Palin, for example. She just recently lost. She was supposed to win. This person's a no-name person who she was competing with. But it's like, did anybody really feel like if you look at Bernie Sanders, like, obviously now, it's the energy is different. But when you look at Bernie in his heyday, AOC in her heyday, people were emotionally connected to those candidates. I remember Kyle Kalinske crying over Bernie Sanders commercials, which, people make fun of that stuff. I don't make fun of it because that tells me that you're really serious about the shit you're talking about. But there is no Republican figure that carries that kind of emotional weight. You know what I'm saying? Other than Trump. And so, yeah, I think the Dobbs decision would hurt the Republican Party for sure. But that's not. But it didn't have to hurt them as bad as it did. But because these people don't see the connections between all of these issues, like they don't see the connection between student loan debt and abortion, for example. There's an obvious connection. And anybody that's been on the ground working with women and young men who are terrified that having a child is going to completely destroy them, that's a very relevant issue. And it's things like that where it just seems to me like those folks like don't even have an understanding of how to speak the common man's lexicon. Democrats know how to speak the common man's lexicon, but they don't have the self-awareness to realize that they have contradicted themselves so much and made themselves raging hypocrites so much that nobody believes them. So we're both in this kind of weird situation where now it's like you're picking teams based on a person, like who can I hitch my wagon to, who appeals to me emotionally, and that's kind of the situation we're in. And when we're in that situation, yeah, I mean, I will say DeSantis seems to be seems to cross that boundary to where he is connecting with his constituency emotionally, and he's using, in my view, the LGBT community to do it. So I tip my hat to him in the sense that I respect the political maneuvering, but obviously I'm not a fan of sacrificing a marginalized group of people to get, that popularity or whatever. Yeah. And equates in mind just switch parties because of the debt thing. Still doesn't like abortion or black people, but one party just took $10K off his six-figure debt and capped his interest and payments, and the other told him bootstrap, so material interests went out. He doesn't like abortion or black people. Well, if he doesn't like black people, he should love abortion because it's destroying my community. But yeah, I agree. I mean, people were really, really hurt. They were really hurting on this student loan debt stuff. And that's what I say about, like, Republicans. Like, when these people come on television, you're a millionaire. All, Tucker, these guys are all millionaires. Tucker's never had a struggle a day in his life. He's the heir to the, Swanson family estate. So I'm not upset at him. He can only speak from his lived experience. You know what I'm saying? He doesn't know what it is to struggle and grind and face down, the energy crisis, whether it's gas or even keeping the lights on. You have that. Then you've got your student loan debt over here. Then you've got your health care thing over here, because we've given our health institutions financial incentives to let people die. So you get all those things put together. Instead of saying, I don't agree with this in principle or whatever, you have to mock and deride the people that were struggling. And there's no understanding that you think it's only liberals that have been, it's probably more conservatives are gonna benefit from this than probably liberals, because I would assume that a person who's more Republicanly inclined would be more apt to go to college and do secondary and tertiary education. So this is probably going to turn out to benefit, Republicans the most. So whether or not they agree with it, I just think it's just terrible politics to deride the people who are going to benefit from it. And that tells me that these Republicans don't understand the financial situation of their constituents. I still feel like Trump will somehow end up being the president again. Americans are very fickle. You know, Delaney, we're extremely fickle beings. So it would not surprise me in the least if he became president. You know, obviously we'll have to look at what the economy does. If Biden in the next 2 years is still doing this Ukraine nonsense, I guess he just sent another $10 billion to Ukraine. Like, this shit is incredible to me. Like, you know, if he keeps doing that dumb shit, then yeah, I think you're gonna have a serious problem. As far as seeing Trump again. But who cares, Ben? If Trump ends up president again, it won't be by the popular vote. Who cares? It doesn't matter. In This Moment, I actually saw In This Moment live. In This Moment is actually very, very good live. And they also have a pretty unique... I think they were going with a Handmaid's Tale like aesthetic, which I didn't really get because I hadn't watched Handmaid's Tale. But I think that's what they were trying to pull off with their live show, which would have been even more meaningful if I had been able to see it beforehand. Do you think me keeping photos of my daughter off my social media pages is a good choice, even though my mother's and father's family complain to me that they want to see my daughter? Yeah, of course I think it's a great choice, Michelle. I mean, look, you know, parents are always going to have their little, you know, preferences, but you know better than them, you know, how the internet is. And so you're making that choice. So, good for you. Yeah, Maria Brink. Yeah, I think I have a hell of a lot of respect for her. She is more, when I look at her, I go, she's a little bit on the poppy side, but I feel like she's still like a metalhead. Like it's, but like I said, her set actually reminded me of Beyonce. Like she had all these other like minionettes with her and stuff, and it was like choreographed. You could tell they put a lot of time into the presentation. I just thought that was amazing. They did a really good job. Have you been watching House of the Dragon? It's pretty good. No, I really haven't. I don't know if I will ever watch the Game of Thrones franchise again. You know, Emilia Clarke was talking about some of this. Actually, somebody actually challenged me on it from the Village, actually, and it's actually soured me to the show ever since then. But you know, Emilia Clarke was talking about doing scenes that she wasn't comfortable with doing, but doing them anyway because you know why. So, you know, trying to be consistent with the whole sexual exploitation thing. And so I don't have a problem necessarily with portrayals of assault or like horrible chauvinism or whatever if it's in the context of the story and if it adds, you know, a wrinkle or something to the story that's relevant, then cool. But when I hear the actual actors and actresses themselves relate that they were uncomfortable and that they expressed it, but they were pressured to do so, I generally try to stay away from that because I want to be as consistent as I possibly can with my sexual ethics. So that whole situation soured me to the show because the way women are treated in the universe of the show is one thing, but to realize that they were also treated that way in the actual real world now you're going from observing a story to participating in it, and conscience-wise, I don't want to participate in something like that. You know what I mean? It's just an attempt to try to be as consistent with my ethics as I possibly can. How do you feel about Young Thug case using his lyrics to indict him for a crime he might or might not have committed? Off the top of my head, I'd say this is a clear. People say nobody indicts Arnold Schwarzenegger for playing the role of a killer. In all the movies where he's got a body kind of like. I think Arnold Schwarzenegger has killed like 455 people on camera or something like that. And people are talking about, well, how come it's these rappers that get, why are you going after the rappers? Why is their art used against him? And obviously there's the racial ramifications, and I understand that, but I got to tell you, rap is tied, especially the kind of rap that Young Thug, King Von, those kind of guys do. It's tied to a certain culture. Like, for example, King Von. King Von killed anywhere between 4 to 7 people. And King Von's main claim to fame was the fact that he killed those people. And he rapped about killing those people. And everybody, he's dead now, obviously. Everybody around him, like, even after he died, people were like, yo, man, everything Von said was true, blah, blah, blah. So it's like, these guys are capitalizing off of the fact that they truly are committing crimes, and then you're putting it on wax. So now, people end up dead, or extortion happens, or, a 9-year-old gets hit in a drive-by, and you out here bragging about it. Vaughn and his song War With Us is talking about put a pretty hot bitch in the morgue. That's him talking about killing Shakira Barnes. Things of that nature, where it's like, and that's why, I was telling Sori about this, like, Vaughn is a very lovable guy, like emotionally your heart goes out to him, and the fact that he went out and he died on some dumb shit after he had just beat a triple murder charge. He beat that all. But then he goes out and he gets out of jail and he's making music, and he comes out, the first song he comes out with is Beat That Body, where he's bragging about killing all these people, all of them who were black, by the way. And then he beat the body. So now he can rap about it and make millions of dollars bragging about it. And the entire claim to fame is there's a bunch of drill rappers that can make rap about that, but not a lot of them actually did that shit. So my point is, you're getting rich off of bragging about how many people you killed and extorted, etc. I'm sorry, man. If it's good for the goose, then it's good for the gander. I'm sorry. Like, in my view, Vaughn had to die. And Young Thug had to get jammed up. Because you guys are not just telling stories. You guys are actually doing this shit. And your killing of other human beings was a prerequisite for your fame. So you gotta go to prison. You gotta go to prison. I'm sorry. Like, to me, you gotta go to prison for that. And I do think the lyrics are relevant. And look, if you come out and say, you do the Rachel Maddow thing and say, hey, nothing I'm saying is real, I'm not really this kind of a person, okay, that's one thing. But I'm sorry, bro, you got all your friends, all your gangster friends, all your gangster enemies saying, yo, he was real, everything he said was real. Cool, you want to rap about killing an out bitch, putting her in a morgue? Great. Okay, then you got to go to jail for the rest of your life, bro. That's how I feel about it. Like, everybody knows I'm a lover of my people. I'm a lover of black people. You know what I'm saying? Like, I hate when, unfair treatment and all the rest of it. But I'm sorry. There is a big difference between Arnold Schwarzenegger and King Von. King Von really killed those people, and he really bragged about it. Well, then it should be able to be used as evidence then. If you come out as a rapper and say, nothing I say is real or true, then fine. But you don't get to go out there, make a killing off of killing people, but then tell the court system, nah, you can't use that. You can't use that against me in court. Nah, bro, I'm not with that. You gotta go. You gotta go. You either gotta die, you gotta go to prison, you gotta do that time, bro. And I think if you are a lover of black people and just people in general, obviously that's a system that is gonna produce dead bodies on a consistent basis. If you make millionaires out of killers, then you're incentivizing killing in our neighborhood. So I'm glad that people that these guys get jammed up. I really am. I'm glad they get jammed up, and I'm glad that they go away, and I hope they go away forever. I really do. So that's how I feel about it. I know. I love Von. I love him too. Because I remember that. I remember that energy. I gotta be honest with you. These Chicago boys, all the shit that they're doing, like, we were scared to death of police. So I had a friend one time. A shooting had happened, and there was a DT coming like right around the corner. So usually you pop, 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 and like everybody ducks, everybody runs, and then you see this one guy not ducking and running, like going towards a gunfire. Everybody knows, like, okay, that's a cop. Tell me why this dude put his jammy in his pocket. Of course, everybody knows, like, after you've just used it, the barrel's extremely hot, so like his skin is like frying as this cop is like coming toward, and we knew like this guy obviously has to be a DT. The guy started talking, blah blah blah, and he's like, "Did you see anything?" And like, "Yo, I'm smelling this." Like, he's got the shit in he had his banger he put that shit in his pocket like right after you. Ridiculous. And yeah, he was. What's up, Ashley? He had his. And he was like, yo, he just kept like a straight face, completely blah, blah, blah. And we were just like, nah, we didn't see anything, blah, blah, blah. We didn't see nothing, yada, yada, yada. And, and then we were able to use the excuse that, like, yo, we out of here. We ran away because, like, yo, we don't, you know what I'm saying? We're able to, like, run away and get out of there. But my point is, like, we would have never, if we had Twitter or Facebook or some shit like that, we would have never, like, went on Twitter and be like, yo, that would have never happened, bro. Like, we were terrified of getting found out by police. So, like, these guys out here, like, saying all types of crazy shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, in full view of the police. Like, it's, like, mind-boggling to me. Like, police are following you, and you're going to claim all these bodies. This shit is just weird. It's weird to me, man. I don't know. Yeah, but like even if we had that BS back in the day, like, dude, we would have never done that shit. Like, I remember, like, we pulled his pants down on the train because his entire thigh was like he cooked it because he put his shit in his pants while he went right through his clothes, everything. Like, it looked pretty nasty. It looked pretty gross. But yeah, nowadays these kids, like, we wouldn't even take him to the hospital. Like, it was like, yo, you want to go to Montefiore? He's like, nah, I ain't going to no Monte. He's like, we would like. So these dudes are out there, doing all types of crazy shit and then, like, bragging about it. I don't understand that, man. I saw one video, like, these kids, they shot up this dude at a bus stop. And then, like, the cops are still there, like, processing the scene, and they showed up again and put it on Instagram. It's like, okay. It's weird. What's up, Diavolo? What do you think of the Book of Enoch talking about an alien race known as the Anunnaki? Well, the Book of Enoch doesn't use the term Anunnaki. It uses the term Watchers. So Anunnaki means those who came down, right? So you got the ancient Near Eastern pagan literature that talked about those who came down, like these beings that came down, these divine beings that cohabited with humans and then created these kind of demigods, kind of like Herculean type beings, right? Where Hercules is a mixture of a divine and a human element. And because of that, he's kind of like this superhuman, half divine person. And so the Anunnaki would be, you know, the Zeus type divine beings that came down and then cohabited with women and that gave birth to these giants. In the Enochian literature, the term Anunnaki isn't used. The term that's used is Watchers. And when the Watchers cohabit with, you know, Shemyaza, a couple of the other guys, these are divine beings that have jurisdiction over certain areas of the earth and over certain groups of people in the earth. And they came down and decided to cohabit with women. So the Watchers came down, cohabited with women, and then what they gave birth to were called Nephilim, or the fallen ones. What do I think of it? What I think of it is that I believe that it happened. I do believe that extra-dimensional beings are able to manipulate material in such a way as to have offspring that are that accounts for legends like Hercules, and there are divine human hybrid legends in every major ancient people group. So I do think that that's significant. I do think there's a connection with the UFO phenomena, but that's as much as I'll say unless somebody asks me another question. Ben, are you an adult? That's an interesting question. Lots of us have asked that question. What do you think of the Gnostic Gospels compared to the Gospels in the Bible, and do you think they should be included in the Bible? Well, I think Gnosticism, obviously at its core, is anti-Christian. There's a very tactile, you know, in 1 John where he says, that which we have seen, which we have touched, that which our hand has touched. The idea that Jesus wasn't really here as a physical human, flesh and blood human being. He was simply a phantom, as the Docetists say, which is what John was dealing with in 1 John. Aside from certain versions of Judaism, Gnosticism was one of the first sort of contenders to Christianity. And so I think there's a bunch in the New Testament, whether it's Colossians, you know, where Paul talks about those saying, do not handle, do not taste, do not touch. Obviously, 1 John is written as a contra to Gnosticism. So I just don't think that it's possible to even say that you could harmonize Gnosticism as a theology with the Christian faith. One of the things that you have to do is, on top of, you know, making sure that the New Testament agrees with itself, the New Testament claims that it's a continuation of the Old Testament. And so there has to be a strand of theology that links whatever you're saying in the New Testament to the Old Testament. And obviously Gnosticism, where Yahweh's a demiurge who was a fool and shouldn't have created the material world, obviously is not something you can harmonize with an Old Testament worldview. So those are a couple reasons why I don't believe any of the Gnostic Gospels are valid. Vin should play one song at the end of the stream. Let's vote for one. the ancient legends of my ancestors sound a lot like the Nephilim. Yeah, Michelle, I think that the ancient legends of your ancestors are probably right, or more right than wrong, if whatever. I think that a lot of us are seeing the same thing in certain areas, and then we're not seeing the same thing in other areas, and so that's where the discussions come in. Obviously, for me, for a person with the mindset that I have, having Jesus as an actual historical person changes things, right? Because now it's people say, well, what about Thor? What about nobody's claiming Thor is an actual historical person. So I've got an actual historical person who the sort of myth and history kind of coincide in the person of Jesus. It's a very, very interesting. Very interesting. 10 minutes, guys. 10 minutes. Do you believe in ghosts? It really depends on what people classify as ghosts. I am pretty convinced that I'm probably, my philosophical perspective right now is probably a form of idealism in which consciousness and will or intention is what is fundamental, and that what we call the physical world are emanations from a mind. So if that's the case, in the three-dimensional, well, four-dimensional, because you have time as a dimension in this current reality we're in. So we live in 4 dimensions, right? Because time is one. But I do think there's, other dimensions, 5 dimensions. Like I said, some say 5, some say 10, whatever. But if there are other dimensions, then obviously, because I'm limited to only 3, I can only see 3, 2, or 1-dimensional objects or interact with 3, 2, or 1-dimensional beings. And so, if there are other dimensions, then it would also stand to reason that there are sentient beings within those dimensions that are much more complex than we are, that we're not able to measure because we're trapped only in 3 dimensions, in the same way that an ant wouldn't be able to measure us because his world is a 2D world. So, long story short, if you're saying, do you believe that your friend Joe died and then his essence is showing up in your room? I don't know that I believe that at all. But if you ask me, are there other dimensions, and are there portals between dimensions that they're privy to, that they can then interact with us at this level and are limited? Yes, I believe that. And if you're going to call that intelligence a ghost, then fine. The reason I'm saying it's different from him showing up in your room is that I don't believe that projection or that spook, whatever that thing is that's standing in your room, is really there. I would look at that as a projection from that mind, because it knows that this is the only way you can process that this essence or intelligence was your brother or your cousin or whatever. So I don't know how that works. Pure, how's it going? It's going very, very well, Diablo. Very, very well. Ever notice how ghosts in the media are always white? Even Asian ghosts end up being white for some reason. What do you think of the stories that people tell based on their clinical death experiences? Yeah, I actually was reading a pretty broad peer-reviewed article on near-death experiences, and it was fascinating because the conclusion of the article was he essentially said we currently don't have the science to explain how these people are doing this. So basically said, we don't have a physiological explanation for how this is happening. So it wouldn't, like, in true form, like all scientists, like they wouldn't say, holy shit, there's life after death, blah, blah, blah. They just said, our current paradigms have no explanation for this. What is your view on limited atonement? Do you think Christ dies sufficiently for all, but efficaciously for the elect? Do you think sufficient only to the elect? Well, okay. Here's why I'm pausing when I answer that question. That question assumes a zero sum result of the atonement, right? So, like, if you're in traditional Calvinism, and this is the first time I've actually ever expressed this, so I'm going to say this to you and see how this works, and then I'm going to talk to Sori about it. Because maybe I find a way to weasel out of some of the ramifications. Okay, so you've got Christus Exemplar, which is Christ died as the ultimate example of the Sermon on the Mount. Like, he lived the Sermon on the Mount to the extreme degree by allowing himself to be spit upon, brutalized, crucified, yada, yada, yada. And he entrusted himself to God, knowing that God would raise him from the dead. So Jesus died for you. When they say that, when a person that believes that says Jesus died for you, what they're saying is the ultimate reason Jesus died was to show you how to live out the Sermon on the Mount. And in that, he saves you from your own sinfulness. And in you doing that, you save the world from sin through that, right? So that's one example. That's Christus Exemplar. Then you have Christus Victor, which is Christ wasn't paying a ransom to God the Father. He wasn't atoning for our sins per se. That Christ was overcoming the principalities and the powers by taking sin onto himself, and so he emerges victorious at the resurrection. So you can avoid the divine child abuse stuff, and you can go straight to whatever. Then the third one is obviously penal substitution, which is Christ paid the price for. And then there's a subcategory to that, which is if Christ would not have agreed to atone for the world, then God would have to completely, evaporate the world in flames, because we would just be repeating the flood situation. There would be no hope for our forward progression. So Jesus died for the world in the sense that if he didn't die and provide some sort of redemptive arc for mankind, then the world itself would be destroyed. So there is a sense in which even unbelievers benefit from the death of Christ, because there would be no world if it wasn't for that. Okay, so if you ask me at the penal substitutionary level, did Christ die for the non-elect, I would say I don't believe that Jesus was dying for Pharaoh's sins. Or let me say it this way. I don't believe that Jesus was paying for Pharaoh's sins when he was on the cross. So if you look at the cross from the perspective of penal substitution, I would say that. But as far as Christus Exemplar, which I think is a sub-intention of the atonement, and you can definitely see that, Paul uses Christ's death to encourage people to do things like pay taxes or be nice to each other or have a good marriage, right? So clearly, Paul is using Christus Exemplar that way. Lorraine Bettner in John 3:16 said that when it says God so loved the world, that he was literally talking about the world, because the world was plunged into entropy. Romans 8, so sin and death entered the world through mankind's sin. So through mankind's redemption, the earth will be redeemed again. And he's not just talking about the people of the world, but earth itself, or the universe itself, reversing entropy itself. So in that sense, I could say that God died for everybody. because we're talking about renovating the world and redeeming the world, and so anybody that is reaping the benefits of the redemption of the world, which I will say, I think we'll both say that the Western world, the reason we ended up at the moon was because of Christianity. I think you could make that argument very clearly. And so in that sense, you could say, so I believe that there are universal benefits to the atonement that everybody experiences. And I also think that there are very specific benefits of the atonement which only those who believe receive, which would be the spirit of adoption, having all of your sins canceled, etc., etc., etc. So that's as close as I can get on the limited atonement question. Good question. That's a I've never said that before, so let me know if that was just too whatever. I have a question. Whenever you talk about God, or you ever feel like a weird love energy, is it just me? No, that happens all the time. Whenever I talk about God, or when I think about God, that happens a lot. Vin, I'm also sick. It sucks. I'm sorry to hear that, big boy. I hope you're doing good, though. Yeah, I think if you're talking about penal substitution, I just think that it's impossible to say in any coherent fashion that Jesus was paying for Pharaoh's sins. Although there's an eternal aspect to the atonement, God did decide to have Jesus do the actual work of the atonement in our time-space continuum. So I don't really see the utility in saying that Jesus paid for Pharaoh's sins. You know what I'm saying? But I do think that there are real tangible benefits to the atonement that are non-penal, that unbelievers do receive. You know. Was Jesus technically a zombie? Well, yeah. I mean, I've heard the zombie thing, which is a strange. That's a strange idea to me. There are people that we know that have been clinically dead. Interesting. People talk about near-death experiences. Like, we know that there is a phenomena that people are clinically dead, and then for whatever reason, they get classified as clinically alive after a certain period of time. We don't call those people zombies. A zombie is not a resurrection, although the zombie in our cultural zeitgeist does represent something interesting, because it tells us that there's a way to be dead even though you're alive. Nobody looks at a zombie and says, you are going to be like that glorious thing. Resurrection is an upgrade from what we are. It's not a downgrade. I think everybody would agree that a zombie is a downgrade from what we are, but a resurrection is an upgrade. It's there's certain theological schools of thought that use the term deification, or a guy like C.S. Lewis who says, if you were to see a redeemed believer in the new world, you would be tempted to worship him or her. And so I think that that's qualitatively different, obviously, from zombies. I do think, there's a terrifying passage in the book of Daniel. It says that the last day that the graves will be opened, and those who are among the righteous will shine like the stars in the kingdom of their Father. And then it says of the wicked, they'll be risen to shame and everlasting contempt. And so the zombie motif actually, I think is actually useful for our discussion, When people ask me about hell, I always say that hell is what would happen if you had the Purge combined with the Walking Dead, right? So like if you had a city, like if you had a group of sort of sentient zombies who had a form of intelligence, but that divine spark of humanity was gone, and all they had left was their urges to consume, which is really interesting because one time in describing unbelievers, the scripture says their God is their stomach. Right? Like their God is their inclinations to consume, whatever that might be. Like that's the. So imagine being a sentient, self-aware being that used to carry the image of God, but is now completely subsumed and dominated by the urge to consume. And you lived in a lawless environment where there were no laws to protect you from people wanting to consume you and vice versa. And what kind of society would you build? What kind of TV shows would you make? What type of music would you produce? I think when we talk about hell or heaven, I still just think we're talking about societies. And so I do believe that that zombies are actually a real thing. And that's one of the things I'm trying to avoid when I tell people about Jesus. Hell is New York City without AC. Yeah, I think that's part of it. Do you think the sun is there to represent God in the physical world to some extent? It provides a condition of life. It's a sort of life. It's impossible to look at, etc. Yeah, I actually think that everything in the physical world is actually metaphorical, and I do think like I literally believe. Okay, so like I said, I'm an idealist, and with some conscious agents theory mixed in. So I literally believe that everything is what we call matter are just live action metaphors for us. And so yeah, I when you talk about the sun and things of that nature, absolutely. And you kind of alluded to this with his understanding of synchronicity, which is an interesting aspect, but yeah. Do you believe in the form of consciousness that we're acutely aware of actually exists within the fourth dimension? Are we just physical manifestations of consciousness? Is time nonlinear? Right, so like time is the fourth dimension. So the fifth dimension on up. Yeah, I do believe in self-aware beings in the fifth dimension on up, and that dimension, the fifth dimension on up, is what I think the Bible calls the spiritual world. Or when people talk the spiritual world or demons, angels, whatever, they're just talking about the people that inhabit those dimensions, the fifth dimension on up. That's what I believe. I believe that our physical bodies are manifestations of our consciousness and our intentions. And that we look at each other, that we have the physical world so that we can more easily identify different consciousnesses to interact with. So there's a certain physical profile of Sori, and so all of the consciousnesses that make her who she is, her physical body is basically a shorthand for me to separate her from you, from my kids, whoever. That's what I believe. I am neutral. If God is real, I'd like to believe. If God isn't real, I'd rather not believe. I'm more interested in what is true. Unfortunately for God, all signs point to no. I don't know how you could have a concept of truth without God. Vin, that was a great addition to my health theology. Thank you. I want to think more about some verses now. I think zombies could be real from a biblical perspective. Yeah, I think a lot of this stuff is real. Jung thought all of it was real, depending on how you understand what real is. I want to believe in God, but my head won't let me. Interesting. Very interesting. Their God is their inclination to consume. Sounds like an apt description of capitalism. Yeah, I mean, I use the term consume for a very specific reason, and you, among other people, have really helped me see capitalism for what it is. Now, a lot of my friends, when I start criticizing capitalism, they automatically think that I mean that socialism is better or communism is better. And I always say, I don't think Jesus is a mascot for anybody. But I do know what he's against, and I do know that exploiting people, particularly with interest, and exploiting 17-year-olds and 18-year-olds whose brains, the reasoning mechanisms of their brains haven't even hardened yet completely at the age of 18. Putting these kids into $35,000 debt at 6 to 12% interest, I know for a fact Jesus is against that. That doesn't mean that he is a socialist or a communist mascot. Obviously, sending people to the gulags is something that Jesus would be against as well. But I do think as a Christian, you really, really, really have to contend with the implications of how capitalism affects you spiritually. I mean, the scripture says, the scripture nowhere says that homosexuality is idolatry. But the scripture explicitly says in Ephesians and Colossians that greed is idolatry. And if you remember, thou shalt not kill was not the first commandment. The first commandment was to have no other gods. And so the greedy person is in much more spiritual peril than the gay person. And yet, where is all the energy put? Right? So criticisms of capitalism, I do think need to be taken more seriously by American Christians. So, then I wanted to send you an email, but now's a great time. Question: where's the line between a regular government and an authoritarian government? Well, I don't think it's possible from a secular perspective to avoid authoritarianism. Because if you're a secularist, rights don't come from a transcendent arbiter. Rights come from the whims of the majority or the whims of a select few who are in power. So if you think about what America was dealing with during the Revolutionary War, we're talking about attacks on tea. Not an attack on tea, but attacks on tea. And they looked at that as authoritarianism. Now, you also had, the 13 grievances, things of that nature, where, there were all these issues. But what was fascinating is when in the Declaration of Independence, you had this phrase, we hold these truths to be self-evident. What's a self-evident axiomatic truth? All men are created equal. Where'd you get that idea from? They are down with certain inalienable rights. Inalienable. Right? You cannot alienate people from these rights. Where did these rights come from? Given to them by popular vote? No. Given to them by a decree of Congress? No. Given to them by their creator. People are endowed with inalienable rights given to them by their creator. So the argument is, yes, King George, you're a king. You've got all this authority, whatever. You're the monarch. You're the elite. That's great. So you can take X, Y, Z, but you can't take my rights from me because you didn't give them to me. God gave them to me. So what it did is it sets up a third-party arbiter. It's much like playing basketball. Like if you play basketball and you're LeBron James, you're the biggest, strongest, fastest person on the court, and everybody says we'll just make up the rules as we go along. Well, obviously LeBron is gonna win every game because he has a certain physical gift set to where he'll be able to dominate the game. Because if it's up to the people playing to make up the rules as they go along, then the strongest person is just gonna oppress everybody else. But you'll notice in a basketball game where you have these giants, these people at the peak of their powers, these strong black towers of men that can be now, bless God, that can be stopped in their tracks by a 5'4" woman. And she can tell that multi-millionaire, billionaire, you need to go over there or you can't play in this game anymore. Why? Because there is a rule above that. And that ref is the enforcer of the third party. If you leave it up to the people playing the game, then you're never going to have a game. But the people in the game submit to that referee because of the rule book. Right? So if I say, LeBron, you can't take 3 steps. He says, well, says who? Well, the rule book says so, and here's the coach who's the enforcer of the rule book. So you have to understand, like, certain perspectives of the government. What's the role of the government? The role of the government, from my view, is to make sure that the God-given rights that all of us have are secured, that people leave each other alone. Because the bent of natural humanity is to deny each other of rights to further our own agenda. And so the role of the government is to make sure that people's rights are not denied, rather that they're secured. So, like, for example, I wish we would get away from law enforcement to rights enforcement. Because if these officers looked at themselves as rights enforcement officers, then maybe they would look at everybody differently. The entire purpose of the law is to secure rights. We don't have rights to secure laws. The point of laws are to secure rights. So why are you stopping at law enforcement? It should be rights enforcement. But again, where do those rights come from? That has serious implications. So when you talk about authoritarianism, that comes with an understanding that all of us are equal, and that a small group of people or a large group of people should not be able to dictate the lives of other people. Well, there's a lot of sophisticated philosophy that goes into that. Not everybody believes that authoritarianism is bad, and from a secular perspective, it is impossible to make that argument that it's inherently bad, because there is no transcendent referee that gave you your rights. So in a secular perspective, we're just making up the rules as we go along, and it's a terror of the majority. So you have people, in America, we voted and it was, hey, black people are 3/5 human. Well, why would you vote for that? The Bible says that from one man, God made all nations of men, and that all of us are equal. But if you say that our rights come from the government, then the government determines who has the rights and who doesn't. And that gets manifested in a lot of different areas in our culture today, whether you're talking about race, whether you're talking about the life issue, whatever it is. It's impossible to argue against authoritarianism from a secular perspective. So I think authoritarianism is what happens when the government decides that the rights of the people come from them and not from God. If you have a worldview where rights come from God and not the government, you have at least a basis to make an argument against authoritarianism. You and I are equal. We're supposed to rule this world together. We're not supposed to oppress each other. So the minute that you go from securing my rights to dictating my life, then you're an authoritarian, and it should not happen. But I don't know how you make that argument from a secular perspective, like definitively. you can pretty easily ground fundamental rights axiomatically in the golden rule, though. I don't know how you can do that. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you is a decent principle, but negative vibes, you don't believe that. Like for example, negative vibes, you're pro-choice, right? Like, I want to have a big discussion on abortion, but you would never want what happens to those babies to happen to you. So, again, like, you could say, well, you know, love your neighbor as yourself, or the golden rule, or I'm sure there's Islamic golden rules and things like that. But what's the philosophical grounds by which you can enforce that and impose that on people? That's the question. How can you philosophically impose that on me in a consistent basis if we're starting from the perspective that you and I are players on the court? There is no referee. There is no rule book. There is no way to play the game of life. We're all just making up as we go along. So how is your axiom better than mine if we're both playing? How about a sports question? You were dismissive of Josh Allen last season, but it seems you made a change your opinion. If so, why? I mean, the playoff game against Mahomes. I thought that, first of all, I don't believe that they should change that rule, but I just respected the hell out of him for. I've never seen anything like that. The unwillingness to quit, to not give up. I thought it was one of the most amazing displays of mental toughness I've ever seen. It was brilliant. Looking for a sign from God. When does it come? Send me an email, Delaney, linnandsawyer@gmail.com. Then I think you're misrepresenting secularism. It's very possible. You can base rights in things without them being arbitrary, i.e. an egalitarian state or a Freudian state. Those are both non-arbitrary. What's arbitrary is why I should hold to an egalitarian perspective. Especially you, Ben. You don't believe all human beings should enjoy the same rights. So you can't hold to egalitarianism consistently. Honestly, I totally see the British perspective. Read the Revolution. They were trying to recoup all the money they lost to fund the colonies in the French and Indian War. I agree. The founding fathers had no biblical right to start that war at all. So that I agree with you 100%. Why should I be beholden to a Christian world, though? I don't believe in God either, so your stance is no less arbitrary. Well, that doesn't make sense. That's like saying, well, I have a different understanding of physics of you, so why should I be beholden to the doctrine of gravity? Well, you can choose to agree or disagree with gravity, but gravity is ultimate reality in this dimension. You see what I'm saying? So what I'm saying is, even if I assumed your reality that there was no God, or a reality that there was no God, what I'm saying is it would be impossible to ground the concept of rights in anything other than what the government distributes to you from its gracious hand. And if the government can give you your rights, then the government can take them away, which has been the story of humanity, whether it's Nazi Germany, the antebellum South, or what happens in America today. The state giveth and the state taketh away rights. So there has to be, in my view, to keep everybody safe, an agreed upon structure wherein rights don't come from the people playing the game. Rights come from a transcendent source that you can then refer back to settle disputes. I've always wanted to join in on the God discussion because I've been trying my own research into Neoplatonism. Good stuff. If someone believes in egalitarianism and someone else doesn't, grounding rights in that is arbitrary. If somebody believes in God and someone doesn't, grounding rights in that. No. Ben, if God is real, then grounding your rights in God is not arbitrary. Secondly, on a principial basis, as I said, you have a much more logical shot at playing a fair game if both of the players in the game are beholden to a transcendent law and lawgiver. In a basketball analogy, it would be James Naismith. Naismith is the god of basketball. He wrote the rule books, and everybody's beholden to his standards. And so, what I'm saying is, as a principle, if we took an original premise, there is no God, then what I'm saying is it is impossible to establish rights as any sort of objective thing. And if you cannot establish rights, then it is certain that the people in the minority group are going to be exploited. I'm curious why God had to use Adam's rib to create a woman. Every time I punch some guy in the rib, it hurts me. What the fuck? Yeah, the Hebrew word actually doesn't say rib. It says side. And as Augustine said, he didn't take her from his front so as to rule him, or from his back so as to follow him, but from as his side to rule with him. It was a very, very beautiful, beautiful text, actually. I'm not saying, Ben, I'm not even saying that egalitarianism is more or less authoritative than religion. What I'm saying is the grounding principles that you use to get to egalitarianism assume a lot. It assumes that human beings are valuable, but it assumes that the distinctive features that make me different from you are not definitional of what makes us valuable. That we're valuable and that we're equal just on basis of being human. And my point to you is, you don't even believe that. Because you're good with, you know what I mean. You don't believe that. Right? So, that's what I'm saying, is like, that's a perfect example of how it's impossible to root any sort of doctrine of rights from a secular perspective. Kai in the house. Kai in the house. Ghosts, in my opinion, are real. Sure, there are fake videos online. Yeah, I don't think all the videos are fake. What's good, XBM? Right. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Yeah, BC, but if you say that people are evil pieces of shit, then what you're saying is that there's a standard of good and evil. Right? And so you are attaching a value to humanity based on our ability to come close to that standard of good. Again, that carries with it a ton of assumptions. There's a lot of assumptions in that statement. Don't you think that Eve's first words to Adam after eating the fruit should have been, "Who the hell are you?" Now she has knowledge. Maybe that's why women are smarter than men. She ate the best fruit. Very possible. Very, very possible, my man. Very possible. Stephen Amwar in the house. Yeah, Ben. Ben. I'm not talking about what you believe in. I'm talking about the logical means by which you root that belief, and then how you stay consistent with it across the board. That's the question. Be very interesting to see Vin react to Fixer by Metallica. Thank you for introducing me to Jimmy Dore. He sees where progressives and populists have united class interests that would work practically as a political movement. I agree, but how can we get there? I agree. I love Jimmy. You know, you and I are kind of like the right wing guys that he appeals to, and in my opinion, Jimmy is the best person to get us a hearing. I think he's the best. I look at TYT. They get in their feelings too much. I think TYT is very genuine, but I think they get into their feelings too much. And that Cenk has a real problem with Republicans, and he's just not good for the movement. And I think obviously Tucker, you know, anybody that isn't exactly like him, he's a turnoff to. I just think Jimmy, and it's crazy because it's not like one of those things where Jimmy's like right down the middle, where he kind of like plays the middle and doesn't take any strong stances. He takes risky stances and he speaks passionately, but he does it in a way where he's not trying to alienate people that don't think exactly like him on every topic. And I think that's the issue that people need to get over. I say this all the time for the black community. Like, it doesn't matter if the politician likes you. It doesn't matter why the politician votes for a specific thing. All that matters is what is your agenda? Is your agenda getting done? So, yeah, I think Jimmy's the greatest right now. I think he's the greatest, and he also gives me hope. How'd you score that interview with Jimmy Dore? I was covering his controversy with what's her face, and so we got in contact, and then boom bap, all that stuff happens. I don't really know how. I was sitting there in the in the catering area, and guys in Korn are making fun of me because we had this like text message thing happening. Like, I'll tell Amy, I'll tell you the story in text later on. I'll send you the thread. But I was just like thinking like, holy shit, like, and Sori, this is all she knows, because as soon as she started listening to metal, like Nirvana was the first band that blew her away. 2 months later, she's front stage with Nirvana. Like, I tell all the time, like, we were walking in the Korn thing, it's like thousands of people there. I'm like, this is not normal. This is like the dream of every metalhead, that you just like were born into this. So I don't know. I've been very, 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 very blessed with the multiple channels we've had to talk to the people that we've talked to, and I really don't know how the hell we've gotten so blessed and lucky, but here we are. So there we go. You see that TikTok about Drew Barrymore dancing in the rain and the woman saying it was rape? Yeah, bro, yeah. Actually, after the Korn show, me and Sori were in a parking lot watching that shit. We wasted about 15 minutes because we were like dead ass trying to find like what she did wrong by dancing in the rain or whatever. It was unbelievable to me that this girl like was saying that she was racist. And then we found her on TikTok, and we're looking at other stuff, and like people were like, yo, like, I'm not dissing you, I'm just confused, like, can you explain what's going on? And like the videos was even worse. It was just horrible. Yo, that's crazy. I didn't even think about that, XPM. Do you think Jesus was playing around with numbers 5 when he was writing in the dirt? Yo, which is also like he would have been the true high priest at the time, right? Because whoa, that's crazy. Yo, you gave me a lot to think about there, bro. That shit is crazy. Marcello, I feel there's a lot of Christians who don't put emphasis on the here and now. The meaning in their lives is relaxing. A lot of Christians are not building, but sitting and waiting. Or am I just... No, you're absolutely right, Marcello. There's a lot of that shit. There's a lot of, like, let's sit here until the rapture happens and all that shit. Yeah, I'm with you. What's up, Andrew White? All right, guys. Much love to all of you. Andres Barquero. Good to see you, buddy. Much love to all of you guys. Amy, hit me back. I've been texting you for 3 days. Stop ignoring me. Then I can bribe you. Maybe I can send you that thread, because nobody else is getting that thread. So there you are. Is there any chance for the Bible Boogie's return? Is there some parallel universe? We've had a good long talk about everything. Well, your phone is different. Well, that would have been great for you to tell me that at some point, considering we're supposed to be friends. I'll tell you what, Kai. If the Bible Boogiers hit me up in the next couple days, and I see there's like a real feel for it, then yeah, we'll have to do something. Like, I can't. You can't just let that go. I'd be down to participate in the Bible Boogie. It can bring the Buddhist perspective. I'm down with that. For sure. What do you think about gambling? Is it wrong from a biblical perspective? The Bible doesn't explicitly talk about gambling. It talks about principles. Those who desire to become rich pierce themselves with many griefs. I think that's in Hebrews 12. But if we have food and shelter, we will be content, I think is the rest of that verse. So there's also the Proverbs about how to build money, how money usually builds. Like, if you get fast money, it's not good for you. So there isn't a specific issue with gambling explicitly in the scripture. And I think some of that has to do with gambling functions on a spectrum. Like, people talk about the stock market. But people say, well, yeah, the stock market is kind of gambling, but you could apply a lot of logic so that the outcomes there's a rhyme and reason to it. But if you look at any professional sports bettor, they say the same thing with gambling. So what I'd say is that if you're a gambler, you should be skeptical of yourself as to like what your aims and desires are. You should also look at other habits that you have. Do you have a habitual personality? Are you the type of person that gets addicted to things quickly? The other thing you should think about is, how good is your self-discipline? Can you stop things in the middle of starting something? There's a whole bunch of questions to ask, The only time I'd ever really co-sign gambling for my kids would be if my son had studied, and there's different kinds of gambling. There's gambling on sports teams, which people do as a career, where you study, there's education for it, all that type of thing, and it's a real legitimate source of income. I think that versus playing, the Powerball, spending $1,000 a month on Powerball, I think is a different thing. So I think with gambling, you have to use as much of the common wisdom that God has given you, right? Is this something you're just doing for fun? If there's $1 billion ticket, and you spend like $200 on it, like, yeah, I think that's a lot different from a guy that's spending consistent money destroying his mortgage and the future of his wife and kids. I think that's different. And D Powers is right as usual. Usury is still a sin. Correct. What my self-discipline is often my pleasure always comes first, but I have no dependency. I mean, yeah, and obviously that's a very self-aware statement by Amy Lee. What's your thoughts on the people who believe God is evil, Jesus was Lucifer? I ended up learning about this recently myself and interested in your takes on the matter. Well, I had this experience one time. I was watching The Matrix, and I had this guy in church, and the guy, loved it. He thought that The Matrix was this great analogy for Christianity and all this, and there were books written about that. But we're in a Bible study one time, and I was like, Nero's the Antichrist, though. And he was like, what? He was like so offended and angry. He's like, oh, why would you say that? And I said, well, in Matrix Part 2, when he meets the architect is this guy in all white beard. He's got all these TVs, which are obviously metaphors of his omniscience. He knows all the counterfactuals and all this. And then the language that the architect was using was this very high language that. And I said, obviously they're portraying the architect as God. So here's Neo, and he's going head up against the architect. Obviously, Neo is the Antichrist. They've got you cheering for the Antichrist, and you're angry at God and all the rest of it. So, I understand why people would think that, considering the problem of evil. Anytime I run into a person like that, I just say, read the Gospel of John. And if you can really, truly read the Gospel of John from the first chapter to the last chapter, and then come away saying, yeah, this guy's really a bad guy, then that's different. But I gotta say, like, I've never met anybody that has done that. Or, as Michelle is saying, you do not enter yourselves, nor do you not let others enter, just like Jesus did when he read from the scripture in Isaiah, calling the kingdom of heaven a physical location. Right. Right. Early church polity. I gotta tell you, if you look at the context, the social context of the early church, the diaconate, for example, like, traditionally, there's the beef between the Hellenistic Jews and the pure-born Jews, which gets dealt with where Stephen gets kind of raised up because he's dealing with the distributing the food and all the rest of it for the early church, right? And so traditionally, that's where the diaconate gets stood up. Jesus never said, "All right, guys, stand up a diaconate." My point is that these came out because of organic necessity. You see what I'm saying? Like, these were offices that were stood up. The early church didn't start out saying, "Okay, we need deacons, yada yada yada." But it was a best practice that was adopted in Acts chapter 7. And it was one of those things where traveling missionaries were like, "Yep, we had this problem back there. This is how we solved it. Just get a guy or get a girl who is going to distribute the money fairly and isn't part of this all racial bullshit and just keep shit moving." Right? So that would be like the diaconate was stood up in that context because of the organic need of the church. So I was part of a church plant in a very, rough, in the roughest area of the church plant in America, like literally. And a lot of the things that, first of all, there were people who did deacon-like functions that just naturally arose from the group. There were issues that would come up. We were in a very poor area. We were distributing tons of food, tons of bread. We must have distributed, no exaggeration, probably 4,000 loaves. Just insane. And so you got to have somebody that runs that. Well, the people that were running that particular part of the ministry, like where I didn't have to think about that, like I could focus on the other stuff. Like those people were deacons, but like there was no title. You know what I'm saying? There was just an organic position that came out due to necessity. So my point is, I think that deacons, bishops, presbyters, whatever, I think that I think in any context, whether it's a basketball team, small military units, like for example, like apostle, pastor, deacon, all that. Like I could show you that on teams with guys in bad situations. You know what I'm saying? Like you get people in the military, and like you have people that are like, this person is the leader, we'll follow him. This person, you can parachute them in, and they'll be fine. That's like an apostolic side. You know, apostles are people that can show up, church plant, boom, all that stuff, right? Like, so my point is, these kinds of roles, you find them in all the group dynamics. There's always somebody it's the same thing with bands. Same thing with bands. There's always like a figurehead, a leader, then there's the one that does the practical behind the scenes stuff, and then there's the other one that is press the flesh with the people. Like when I was, backstage hanging out, like I was watching the members of the band, and like there are definitely, like Head is definitely the client facing one. He does most of the interviews. If you Google all the recent Korn interviews, Head does a lot of those. He does a lot of the back office business stuff. Jonathan is a figurehead, obviously. So my point is, the diaconate and the apostle and pastor, all these things are things that I believe they are offices, and I guess you could do that. You can call it that. But I also think that all of those roles would emerge no matter what we called them, because of just group dynamics. And I think if we looked at it that way in a more organic sense, then the church would be able to identify who that person is. Like, naturally speaking, like if you wanted bread or something like that, people knew not to come to me. You know what I'm saying? But if you wanted some theological question answered, people would come to me. You didn't have to put a title on me, you know what I'm saying? Like, people knew, like, you want this, you go to Sori, you go to that, you go to Vin, you go to that, you go to Tabby, you go to this guy. So that's a very long-winded answer for something pretty simple. There you go. I mean, there you go. That's how I look at it. So I think these are organic, sure, things that people did. And I think if we went back to that, instead of institutions saying, all right, guys, here's your apostle, here's your deacon, here's your pastor, here's this is the role he's supposed to do. To me, it just seemed to me like in the early church that the church identified, that the people in the church identified those people. You see what I'm saying? Like I remember one time, one of our folks, like literally, she had, on the bus ride from prison, dropped off in the middle of the street. No friends, no family, no nothing. And one of our folks basically started talking to her and said, "Oh, I know what to do," and brought them to us, and we connected them with housing and whatever. And they're doing great, whatever. That's the shit I love. Like nobody has a specific role per se, like where people know, but it's just like, look, when this scenario comes up, this is a guy for the job. This scenario comes up, this is a girl for the job. This scenario comes up, this is our leadership. This is where we're going. This is the agenda. Yada yada yada. In any healthy group of people, those roles come out. All right, guys. What did God do to cure Moses' headache? He gave him 2 tablets. That's funny. All right, I love you guys. I gotta get out of here. Much love to all you beautiful people.